Excuse me. Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Melissa C. I'm a recovered compulsive overeater. I am in New York. I'm going to join Janet in wishing everybody hello. Welcome to all the newcomers. And I have recovered from compulsive eating. Real quick before I jump into the topic, I had been morbidly obese. I had been struggling my entire life with um, compulsive eating and the physical, effects of having been a compulsive eater. And I have been relieved of over 160 pounds. I have lived free of the food, free of the diets, free of the quick fixes, and all the insanity that accompanied it for over 10 years, almost 11 years now. And so I know that this program works. So if you're new here and you're wondering, can this thing work? It absolutely can. And so with that, I'm going to jump right into step 12 from the AA 12 and 12. So if you have your book, rip it out, take it out, because it's got some amazing pieces of information in here. In fact, it's a lot. So had expressed with Janet earlier, I'm not sure that I'll get through the entire chapter. If we don't, we'll be able to revisit it in a couple of weeks and I'll go back through what we left out. So step 12 says this. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics, in our case, compulsive eaters, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So there's three parts to this step. One, a spiritual awakening. Two, carrying the message to other addicts. And three, practicing these principles in all our affairs. So page 106 in the AA 12 and 12 says this. It asks the big question. What do we mean when you talk about a spiritual awakening? Like, what does that even mean? And the answer comes at the bottom of the page, and then it continues on to page 107. And it says this. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. He has been set on a path which tells him he is really going somewhere, that life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, he has been transformed. And it further goes on to say that he finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, unselfishness, peace of mind, and love of which he had thought himself incapable. I mean, whoa, that is pretty impressive stuff. So, let's look at this, right? When someone asks, what does it mean to be recovered? Like, what do you mean? This is it. This is what it means, that we can do things, that we can feel things, and we believe things that we have never been able to do, feel, or believe on our own. We feel alive inside. That's what it talks about, like being alive inside. We have direction. Our lives feel meaningful and filled with purpose. We become even more honest, tolerant, which means not so sensitive and touchy, and we are genuinely concerned with others more than we are about ourselves. This is described as a free gift that we make ourselves ready to receive. And how do we make ourselves ready to receive it? By practicing the 12 steps. The chapter then gives us a quick description of what those steps are, right? So here we get this incredible gift. For people like me, I needed to work the 12 steps in order to receive the gift, but I didn't create the gift, right? I didn't make it happen for myself. I cooperated with the process, and God, right? God gave me this gift. And so, what is the steps, right? So, page 107, it's going to like just bing, 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 go through it. Step one showed us an amazing paradox. We found that we were totally unable to get rid of the alcohol obsession until we first admitted that we were powerless over it. So I could not say I was going to do better next time. I was going to try better next time. I was going to, like, summon up my strength. I was going to finally be able to follow that food plan. No. In order to do that, I had to say, I can't. I can't seem to do this on my own. I am powerless. And that feels like that's a paradox. It doesn't seem to make sense that I actually can begin to do those things. And first, I have to admit that I can't, right? Okay, step
Mhm.
two, we saw that since we could not restore ourselves to sanity, some higher power must necessarily do so if we were to survive. So, no chance of surviving without God, without having a relationship with God. I am forever stuck in powerlessness. And step three, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. That's what it means to surrender. We surrender to God. Step four, we commenced to search out the things in ourselves which had brought us to physical, moral, and spiritual bankruptcy. And oftentimes people will speak about, oh, when I was in the food, I was, you know, morally and spiritually bankrupt. But actually, it's the opposite. It's my spiritual bankruptcy. It's my lack of living in agreement with God's will for me that causes me to eat. It's not the other way around, right? Otherwise, the first time I went on a diet, I'd be solved. Everything would be better. And we know, and for us, that's not true. Step five, inventory taken alone wouldn't be enough. We knew we would have to quit the deadly business of living alone with our conflicts. And what I say is this is not an independent study. This must be done with others. Step six, many of us balked because we did not wish to have all our defects of character removed because we still loved some of them too much. Yet we knew we had to make a settlement with the fundamental principle of step six. So we decided that while we still had some flaws of character we could not yet relinquish, we ought nevertheless to quit our stubborn, rebellious hanging on to them. And we said to ourselves, this I cannot do today, perhaps, but I can stop crying out, no, never. Right? So I stopped saying, no, I'm never going to give this up. And I start saying, this might be really hard for me to do it today, but I'm willing to make the effort. And step seven, we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings as He could or would under the conditions. And step eight, we continued our house cleaning. We were in conflict, not just with ourselves, but with people and in the world. We had begun to make our peace. And so we listed the people we had harmed and became willing to set things right. And step nine, we go out and we set things right. We make those direct amends to those concerned. And step 10, we begin to get a basis for daily living and then realized we're going to have to continue to take inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admit it, right? So it's like we realize, oh, yeah, we're not one and done, that this is going to be an ongoing practice. In step 11, we saw that if a higher power had restored us to sanity and had enabled us to live with some peace of mind in a sorely troubled world, then such a higher power was worth knowing better by as direct contact as possible. The persistent use of meditation and prayer, we found, did open the channel so that where there had been a trickle, there now was a river. And I always like want to drill down and say, notice the word persistent. So it means that this is going to have to be something that we work at. And I know my experience has been what was a trickle has opened up. And not every single day do I get a river of God consciousness, but it seems like more often than not, I feel like I can receive direct contact. And so you know, if it's worth knowing. I think about it like this: if this God could relieve me of the merciless obsession to kill myself with food, this God is worth knowing. Even better, is worth my time to get to know God better. And and then here it's perfect. There's a perfect explanation of step 12 on page 109. I just love this part. It says this: from great numbers of such experiences, we could predict that the doubter, who still claimed he hadn't got the spiritual angle and who still considered his well loved AA group his higher power, would presently love God and call him by name. So it's clear that you might start out unsure and uncertain, but we can predict it. That, and I've seen it, I've experienced it myself, and I've witnessed it happening for others. That at some point, people stop over explaining the details of their conception of God. It's like they don't say, well, I don't really believe in this God. I believe it. No. At some point, we say, you know what? I'm not going to use a placeholder and I'm not going to use a substitute. And I'm just going to call this power source God. And we come to love God and we long to live in ways in which we can please God and feel closer to Him. And so that's the first part of step 12, right? Now, all right, so now let's move on to the next part: carrying the message to other compulsive eaters and alcoholics. Page 109 says this: even the newest of newcomers finds undreamed rewards as he tries to help his brother alcoholic. You know, here's what happens: we start getting well and we begin to care deeply about those who are still suffering. It happens so quickly that even before progressing through the steps, we begin to get the benefits of step 12 work. And if you're new to the program, you can easily do it. We always suggest, like, make phone calls, make outreach calls, because that in and of itself is part of 12-step work. And I have to say, it never fails that a newcomer or an old timer, right, who suddenly like decides that they're really going to work this program with intensity, who fully surrenders, almost always within a short amount of time begins to talk about helping other people. Like immediately, it's like, oh, I have a neighbor who struggles with this. Or I have a family member, I've got a friend, I have somebody that I used to go to with meetings. And invariably they'll always say, like, can I share a link with them? Can I, it's like this sort of seems to be a natural thing that happens even before reaching step 12. And then on page 112, 110, I'm going to read it right from the book. The first paragraph on page 110, it says this: practically every AA member declares that no satisfaction has been deeper and no joy greater than in a 12-step job well done. To watch the eyes of men and women open with wonder as they move from darkness into light, to see their lives quickly fill with new purpose and meaning, to see whole families reassembled. So, like, guys, families get better from this. That's what sold people on this program, that families got better, to see the alcoholic outcast received back into his community in full citizenship, and above all, to watch these people awaken to the presence of a loving God in their lives. These things are the substance of what we receive as we carry AA's message to the next alcoholic. And so that's what we get. We get to see other people put their hand in God's hands. We get to see other people's lives turn around. And I have to tell you, there is no greater joy. There is nothing more exciting than to see people recover. It's just the greatest gift of all. Okay, so page 110 then describes ways we can carry this message. One, you know, listen at meetings. It talks about coming to meetings and not just to receive, but to offer reassurance and support. And I think that's why it's so important in this Zoom age to leave your camera on if at all possible. You know, because that's how we can feel your presence, right? That's how we can see you. We can see you and we can feel your presence. And I know that, when I share and I see smiling faces and nodding heads, I'm being supported. Like, you might think you're coming in here, what do I have to offer? But a smile and a nod is an incredible gift that anybody can happily feel reassured with, right? If I say something and it's like, oh, yeah, yeah, I mean, that's reassuring for everybody here. Um, you know, I think about it like this. If I went to a meeting and I stood outside in the hallway and I had my ear pressed against the door, nobody inside is benefiting from me on the outside with my ear against that door, right? I'm giving nothing to the group. So if at all possible, right, come on in, put your camera on, put your bottom in the seat, participate with us, right? You're already doing 12-step work. You might be a newcomer and you're practicing the 12 step. Okay, number two, what do? We speak when it's our turn. I always encourage sponsees, share when you're at a meeting. You know, put your hand up when you're in a meeting and you have the opportunity to share, share. Give service if you can. You might be shy, you might feel self conscious, but if you speak honestly and with the intention of getting well and being useful, then you can be sure that God will give you the right words. I feel that way. If you show up with the proper, demeanor, with the right motives in mind, God will never fail to give you the support and the right words. And by the way, if you ever say something foolish, or dumb, or you make a mistake, or people disagree with you, guess what? You're still invited back next week. Like, nobody, your seat is your seat forever, right? Nobody is going to kick you out. You might ask a question, you might say something people disagree with, and next week, at a good meeting, we're all going to smile and welcome you back with open arms. So we should be hopeful and positive in our words. When, as much as possible, we should try to be hopeful and positive. If the meeting is not where I would say this, right? When we go to a meeting, we don't just like vomit all over the group, but we try to offer solutions. Now, of course, if you're struggling, we always encourage people to honestly ask your question, and that many meetings do give opportunities for people to come and ask for help, right? So the text tells us that if they can't share, then they can still be able to carry the message. You can still actually carry the message, right? And here's another way. Number 3 says this: we can be the ones to take on the unspectacular but important tasks that make good 12-step work possible, right? Back in the day, It was like you would clean out the coffee pot or you would set up the coffee at those face-to-face meetings. There are meetings that if you participate in the chat, that's one way. You can ask, can I post something in there, right? Those are things that we can do. In my early meetings, my sponsor had told me, I want you to get there early and I want you to set up the chairs. And that's what I did. I got there early and I set up the chairs and I stayed late. She asked me also because I had a habit of running out as soon as the meeting was over because I didn't want to hug anybody. And please don't hold my hand and talk to me. Well, my sponsor said, no, I want you to stay and put the chairs away afterward. Why? Because that allowed me to get to know people as well, to be able to be useful and helpful, and then stick around long enough to get to know people. So there were many skeptical, suspicious newcomers have found confidence and comfort in the laughter and talk, right? In that laughter and talk of the after meeting. And this is 12-step work in the very best sense of the word. And this makes me think of the people who post in the chat box, who make a point to welcome newcomers. Something you can always do is come on the meeting a few minutes early, greet people, say hello, welcome people. There are some people here that I know they are always good. They are like the welcome committee. They always greet people. They're like, hi, hi, hi. That to me, is the markings of a 12-step work of a good meeting. If you take down numbers and offer fellowship and friendship, making yourself approachable is 12-step work. And by the way, it also, even if you're not at the point where you can sponsor, when you are, if you're on the welcoming committee and it comes time that you need a sponsee, chances are people are going to know who you are and are going to want to reach out to you. Okay, page 111 highlights some difficulties and growing pains we encounter when doing 12-step work. And here it is. Number one, we may set our hearts on getting a particular person sobered up. And after doing all we can for months, we see him relapse, perhaps. This will happen in succession of cases, and we may be deeply discouraged as to our ability to carry the AA message. And, I think of everyone who has ever sponsored has had this difficulty, right? It's heartbreaking when you have somebody, you grow to love them. My experience is I grow to love the people I sponsor. How could I not? We're talking about the most intimate details of our lives. We're building our relationship with God together. It feels it's a friendship. It's an intimate friendship of beautiful, proportion. And then sometimes those people walk away. And it is painful. It hurts. You feel sad. They walk away from the group. But I have to tell you something else. Those people come back if if and when they're willing, when they're entirely willing. Many of those people come back, and that's been my experience. And as I was like reading my notes today, I even like reached out to somebody who that had been her experience all throughout. She was someone, God love her, and she is a powerhouse for OA today. She speaks all over the place, but she was, she did the in and out dance all the time. And I'd be a liar to say it didn't break my heart because I loved her. She was just somebody I still do, felt such great affection for her. But we're not to lose hope. We forever, this is a program of second, third, fourth million chances. We never say, oh, I gave her the best of me already. I shut the door on her. I also believe very firmly, I don't drop people when they pick up just for this reason alone. Because if dropping somebody, first of all, that's punitive. And punishment is like a form of behavior modification. It didn't work, right? No form of punishment ever kept me abstinent. Feeling like somebody was going to not talk to me or not help me, if I slept, if I ate, never kept me sober, never kept me abstinent. What it did was it helped me practice sneakiness and dishonesty. And it also kept me from calling those people, right? And so we keep the light on, the porch light on and the welcome mat out always. So that's something that we might run into difficulty. Number two, we may encounter the reverse situation in which we are highly elated because we seem to have been successful, right? It's like, oh, we start feeling like we're really good at this thing, right? And here the temptation is to become rather possessive of the newcomers, like, oh, they're mine. I got them well. They belong to me, and we belong to nobody, right? We are God's children. So we start thinking that we can counsel them in all areas of their lives. Well intended perhaps, right? Um, but we have to remember sponsees are not our children. A sponsee is not my child. They are adults who, like us, have experiences and perspectives. We can make suggestions, but we should consistently remind them to go to God for the answers, right? We are not life coaches. We are not therapists. We're not mommies. And sometimes we get asked to give advice. And while it's really flattering and often tempting to give advice, it is not good for either parties, right? It's not good for either people, for either one. Because it's teaching a person to be overly dependent on another adult. And really, our dependence must come from God. Okay, number three, we may carry the message to so many that we are placed in a position of trust and we're presented with the temptation to overmanage things. And sometimes this causes rebuffs and other consequences which are hard to take. Hey, I have to say, when I read this, I'm like, oh, guilty. I can be like that. Overmanage. I start feeling like I need to have my hand in managing lots of things. And this is where, you know, having recovery partners is a really someone who's not afraid to tell you the truth is a really important thing that we need, which is why we cannot go it alone. It is not an independent study. Thank God for sponsors and strong recovery partners who will tell you the truth, right? Um, you know, sometimes people respond to certain things that you say, that you share, and it feels critical, right? That can happen too. And it can be interpreted like a snub, and not everybody's going to be pleased by every single word that you say, right? That's not in the 12 step. It's not guaranteed. Every word of little pearl that comes out of your mouth is going to be like celebrated, not necessarily. And it's always a good opportunity to then check your motives. What is your motives? Is it to please everybody in the room, right? Are you trying to be useful and helpful, or are you chasing approval? And so, not everything is going to be met with approval. It's not always a popularity contest, but you're to tell the truth as you believe God would want you to tell the truth. And so, here are some difficulties that are described as only the pains of growing up and nothing but good can come from them if we turn more and more to the entire 12 steps for the answers. So the 12 steps teach me how to practice step 12, right? The 12 steps is like my design for living that works. It teaches me how to be a good daughter. It teaches me how to be a good teacher in my classroom. It teaches me how to be a good neighbor. And it also teaches me how to be a good messenger. how to carry the message the best way I can. So here it is, right? Number one, powerlessness. Okay, powerless over another's recovery. Not only am I powerless over me and my disease, I'm powerless over someone else's recovery. Two, believe that God is the only one who can restore anyone who we work with. God is in the business of restoring that person to sanity, not the person, not the sponsor. They're not the one who's going to restore anybody to sanity. They're merely going to show them what worked for them. Step three, we put these fellows in God's hands, right? God is in control. And then the next 14 pages of the AA 12 and 12 is going to talk
Wonder where you
all
were.
about the third part of step 12, which is practicing these principles in all our affairs. Okay, so page 111. Now comes the biggest question yet. What about the practice of these principles in all our affairs? Okay, what are these affairs? What are they talking about? Well, one, family. Can we bring the same spirit of love and tolerance into our sometimes deranged family lives that we bring into our AA group? Can we have the same kind of confidence? Listen to this, confidence and faith in these people who have been infected and sometimes crippled by our own illness that we have in our sponsors. Wait, what? I'm supposed to have confidence and faith in my family. Yep, in my family. And I have to say, sometimes it's easier to cut fellows some slack than it is for my own family. I seem to be harder. I have higher expectation for what I want from my husband, my children, my siblings than my co-fellows. But here it's telling me, no, I'm actually supposed to have as much faith in them as not just for my co-fellows as I do in my sponsor, right? Whoa. So our families, we're told to love, to have love, tolerance, confidence, and faith in. And I think about it like this: God placed those people in my life for a reason. You know, it wasn't an accident. I don't believe that it's just luck of the draw that these people landed in your family. I believe that there's a design, right? A beautiful design. And all of those people are put in my world as my teachers, right? My greatest teachers in my life have been my parents and my children. Those have been my great teachers. Okay, two, what are the other affairs? My job, our job. Can we actually carry the AA spirit into our daily work? What does that mean, carry that spirit into our daily work? It means constantly thinking of others, even in our workplace. We get to practice that spirit, the spirit of really just thinking about being useful and thinking about others, what would benefit others, even in our workplace. Three, the world at large. Can we meet our newly recognized responsibilities to the world at large? What are our new responsibilities anyway? Well, it's to live in agreement with God's will and to demonstrate that we have been restored to happy and productive lives. We can contribute and not just take. That's my new responsibilities, right? And four, religion that we choose. Can we bring new purpose and devotion to religion, to the religion of our choice? So for some people, that means like turning back to the religion that they grew up with. Other people have found their own religious and spiritual paths via the work of the 12, through the 12 steps of recovery. Sort of seemed to be what happened for me. I found my a special relationship that I have with God that opened me up to more open to different religious ideas and practices. And so I'm supposed to bring this new purpose and devotion to my religion as well. Okay, so we know that life is made up of times where we experience failure as well as success. And can we experience failure without despair? I'm going to talk about the experience of failures. Can we have achievement without growing prideful? Page 112 says this. It's going to talk about how we fall short. What are the ways that we fall short? So our troubles first can begin with indifference. We're sober. We're happy in our AA work. Things go well at home and in our office. We naturally congratulate ourselves, we pat ourselves on the back, and later it seems like it's far too easy and superficial a point of view. We temporarily cease to grow because we feel satisfied, and that there's no reason for all of AA's 12 steps for us. We're doing fine with just a few of them. And so it's like, one of the slang terms that they say is they call it two-stepping, right? You like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm powerlessness. I admit I'm powerless and I'll follow my food plan and now I'll carry the message. No, in order, you know, the disease we're told is progressive, right? It's a progressive disease. Well, if I'm living with a progressive illness, my recovery must continue to progress as well, right? My relationship with God. And so, that idea of just feeling satisfied that I don't need to do all the other work. Think about it like this. A lot of, I've had experience in my life with people who have had different forms of mental illness, right? And one of the greatest difficulties they say for people who have forms of who need to be medicated, right? We believe in the good doctors. And so one of the dangers, this is like an outside issue, but I'll share it, is that people who are under medical care, medicine for a mental health disorder, will start feeling really good and they decide that they don't need to take their medication anymore, right? And that they say is like extremely dangerous. Well, I've seen that happen with people in the 12 steps. All of the wonderful gifts that being recovered gives them, they start feeling so good. They start thinking, maybe I don't need to do all those things that got me well in recovery. Maybe I don't need to, take inventory. Maybe I don't need to pray and meditate quite so often. Next, I don't really need to weigh and measure my food. I don't need to go to a meeting. I don't need to make outreach calls. And then little by little, they're practicing for step one, maybe, and step 12, maybe. That's two-stepping it. And that they say that for some people that it can go on like that for years. What happens is this, right? People might suddenly feel life is dull and we're disappointed by our regular small lives. And that's really dangerous. And I would say if you're wondering if you're headed in that direction, ask yourself, are you being consistent in your nightly inventory? Are you doing it consistently? Are you looking to grow spiritually? Are you spending time really getting to know God? Are you doing the bare minimum? Are you just showing up at meetings when you feel like it, never actively participating, never looking to carry on some of the work? The great danger is our disease is progressive and coasting will not outrun the avalanche that will eventually come. Because eventually we're human and we all get a big catastrophe. It's part of the human experience, right? Something happens in our lives. And if we don't have a scaffold, a structure of a program, we're in incredible danger. when the rough times come. Page 113 says this. What then? Have we alcoholics in AA got or can we get the resources to meet these calamities which come to so many? Can we transform these calamities into assets, sources of growth and comfort to ourselves and those about us? Well, we surely have a chance if we switch from two-stepping to 12-stepping and practicing all the steps. And so, you know, our basic troubles, page 114. Our basic troubles are the same as everyone else's, right? Everyone else in the world gets the same kind of basic troubles. But when an honest effort is made to practice these principles in all our affairs, well grounded AAs seem to have the ability, by God's grace, to take these troubles in stride and turn them into demonstrations of faith. And I just love that. You know, I think that really is a beautiful gift that we get in recovery. That when problems come knocking on our door, with God's grace, right? Not of my own human power, but with God's grace, we seem to be able to take these troubles in stride. And we're able to show we can demonstrate faith. And and I have experienced life difficulties just like everybody else. I've had at varying times I had issues with my children. I've had this, this my mom's dementia, which is really difficult. I've had, difficulty at my workplace, seeming things that, you know, by the way, how about the pandemic, right? That was a pretty difficult time. All of these things are not like unique to me. Many people have trouble with their children at different points in parenting. Many people experience either the loss of a parent or the illness of a parent or the dementia kind of struggle with a parent. And I think those of us who have a well grounded recovery program with a strong relationship in God seem to be able to survive these troubles with great faith and confidence. You know, I would say that I didn't just survive these difficulties, but I feel like I've thrived. I've actually continued to grow in faith. And this is not a unique experience to me. The principles that we learn in this program allow us to somehow go through these times with optimism, right? Because if there's a God who could relieve me of the merciless obsession to kill myself with food, there's a God I can rely on for trouble with my kids. There's a God I can rely on for difficulties with my mom. I can have optimism, serenity, faith, and purpose. It really makes me think about one of the promises of a spiritual awakening, which is found in the big book in the chapter Working with Others, which is directly related, right? It's step 12, working with others. Page 100 says this: follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. It's like we don't quite live on the ground with our problems. It's sort of like when problems come, I sort of almost feel like I'm given like spiritual wings. I sort of like feel a lift and I'm like hovering above it, knowing it's still happening around me, but I can still live in a new and wonderful world. Even when that new and wonderful world seems like it's full of challenges and hard times, we don't seem to have the same responses to hard circumstances. I can feel sad about a circumstance. I even like shared the other day that I was feeling like real sadness about what was happening with my mom, but I'm not enveloped in despair. I don't feel like, pulling my head under the covers and, getting in bed with a bag of popcorn or a pint of Ben and Jerry's. I don't feel that way anymore. Don't feel full of despair. I feel like I'm able to live in a new and wonderful world, regardless of what's going on. So I'm going to put a bookmark in at this point because there's plenty more to get through. And I want to make sure that we leave time for questions. So I'm going to pass at this point.